So there's a lot of buzz about this concept called Agile. You probably have adopted some of it in your organization. It usually starts first in product development organizations or IT. But the purpose of this presentation is to share with you why you might want to think about bringing that mindset, the Agile philosophy, to your entire organization. Not only how it's operated, but how it's managed and how it's led. My name is Jim Ruprecht, and I not only coach and consult on this topic, but I've been in your chair. I have been the guy who has been on the hook to implement this and ensure it's done in a way such that it returns the benefit upon which it's justified. And in this presentation, we're going to walk through three things. We're going to walk through first why you should care. Why does this make sense? Why should you be interested? And then we're going to talk about what is Agile really. There's a lot of misconceptions about what it is, what it'll do, what it won't do. So we'll try and clear up a lot of that and get you straight on what Agile is. And then we're going to dive into the hard part. How do you adopt that in an organization-wide? We're going to talk about organizational agility. Being agile not only in how you operate, but also in how you manage and how you lead. Before we get into anything else really deep, I want to clarify. You're going to hear me use the word organization a lot. When you hear that, understand that I mean that word in its most generic sense. So I mean an organization of any kind, of any style, of any size, of any position in some hierarchy. I don't care. We could be referring to a business, we could be referring to a division within a business, a function within the division, a team within the function, or an individual on some team. We could be referring to a nonprofit. It could be a charity and a chapter. It could be a union and a chapter. It could be a religion, a church, and a parish. Or a lot of this stuff applies to families. So it could be extended family, nuclear family, maybe just a parent team. I don't care. When we use the word organization, we mean it in its most generic sense. Okay? All right, let's level set a couple of things here. So some surveys done by Deloitte and McKinsey showed that 90% of senior executives say they see the need, they want to become agile. But less than 10% see their firms as actually doing that. In fact, fake agile is fairly rampant. Fake agile is when you take your current way of doing something and you just give it new names. You don't really change anything, right? You just give it a different coat of paint. And that's pretty rampant. So the Gartner Group conducted a study, and they found that 66% of leaders actually think they are transforming, whereas the real case when you dive is like 11%. So it's looking kind of, there's a lot of aspiration, right? A lot of desire, but not a lot of action. And the primary reason that studies and our own experience show that the biggest threats to real and durable, so if you're just doing this to check a box, that's one thing. But real, not fake, real agile and durable agile are sins of leadership. And they come in a couple of flavors. First, they don't have a good reason why. They can't provide a noble reason why they want to go about this. Second reason is they think their only responsibility is to allocate the people and the budget, and then they can go off and be on their way. Another reason is that they don't understand that their organization adopting Agile is going to require change in them. And they don't realize that in front, or they kind of ignore it or pay it lip service. And then when push comes to shove, they get cold feet. Kind of along with that is the change that they will then be expected to lead throughout the organization in order for them to adopt Agile. Actually, that's true of any transformation, whether we're talking Agile adoption or some other kind of transformation. The thing, if you leave with nothing else, the thing you need to know is Agile is not a program that you implement. It's not, you're not going to pick up a series of books, and if you start at the top and insert tab A into slot B and you go through all three binders, out pops an Agile organization. It doesn't work that way. Agile is a mindset. It's a philosophy. It's a set of values and principles that you choose to adopt and practice. If ever you hear somebody say, yeah, we're doing Agile, you know you're talking to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. It's not something you do. Agile is something you be. All right, that's, if you walk out with nothing else, that's an important highlight. So our purpose today is to give you a high-level overview, an executive caliber overview of what Agile is, so you can at least be conversationally proficient in it. But also to help you understand what it means for you and for your leadership team. The changes you will personally have to make, as well as the change you will be expected to lead throughout your organization. That's our purpose and objectives for today. All right. Things I would ask you so we can get the most out of this class. First, just be here, right? So I trust everybody's cell phones are stowed and laptops and all that are stowed. Also, you notice you didn't get any handouts in advance. That's me helping you to be present. All right, we'll make PDF copies available afterwards. If you do find something noteworthy, make a note. I got tons of research that says that your retention will be better if you make a handwritten note than if you type on a keyboard, or certainly than if you record it. All right, so I'm helping you learn. You probably just didn't recognize that way. If something is confusing, you are expected to speak up. The way I was raised, the way I've led my organizations, you know, in a lot of families, if you argue with your parents, that's considered a sign of disrespect. The way I was raised, if you held a different opinion and you didn't argue, that was a sign of disrespect, because you were telling that, well, you and your opinion aren't important enough to me to warrant my effort. So same thing here. You're expected to speak up. And then I would ask you to pay attention as if you will later be teaching this or explaining it or debating it with somebody, because chances are you will. So with that, the source of all this material comes from my personal experience, my personal career experience. So you should know something about my journey. And I won't spend a lot of time on this, but give you a clue. A lot of this is pretty foreign to me. My formal background is in quantitative methods. I actually have an informal background in rock and roll. So I started programming in the mid-'60s. Learned on machine language. Does anybody know what that is? Then assembler. And then we learned about compilers. And I could do BASIC and Fortran. It was at the end, I think I had learned like 12 different languages. They were for solving different problems. So SLIP, LIST, ELGAL, as well as Fortran BASIC and some other ones. So I won a couple events in a national programming Olympics, which sounds really impressive until you realize that at that time in history, there were maybe only 3,000 programmers on the planet. Now there's probably 3,000 programmers within 6 blocks. Probably the coolest application I got to do was one. I was assigned to a judge. He was a retired judge who was selected by the court, and I wrote this rules-based, algorithm-driven application to search companies' financial records, everything, 1099s, payroll, accounts payable, looking for illegal political contributions, or at least transactions that looked like they could be. And we'd uncover stuff. I'd give it to the judge. I have no idea what would go on from there. So that's where I came up. I took this, so into business, this was working well. And then I had this epiphany where I had thought, well, certainly if I present the facts and the rationale, the reason, the logic behind it, that should be enough to make the case. What I learned is that when that irresistible force of facts and logic runs into the immovable object of culture and feelings wins. Not just some of the time, every time. This totally confounded me, right? So I decided I had to learn more about it. Let me show you, because I was forced to share this before. Let me show you how dorky I was. The reason I got involved in rock and roll, I was a drummer in a band for a while. You may not, the name we had when we finally were able to make some money was The Flip Side. You can Google them if you want. We didn't seem to exist. All right. But that's sort of, and when I was asked, I said, sure, it sounds like a great way to meet women. And it was, because I didn't have to take the initiative. I was a sophomore in college, and I had this, I worked as a TA in the quantitative methods department. There was this girl that caught my eye, and I wanted to express my interest. So I wrote a note with this equation, signed it with my name, and stuffed it into her notebook while she wasn't looking because I was scared, right? And I didn't want to get busted. So I'm watching her, and she opens it, she looks at it, because I thought, surely, because she was a math person, she'll recognize this. This is going to be awesome, right? Does anybody recognize that equation? I spent a little time figuring this out. Anybody recognize this equation? If you plug this equation into your graphing calculator, or if you've got Wolfram Alpha on, how many people have Wolfram Alpha on their phones? You get this. And I get an awe now, right? It did 0 for me, like it was the biggest bust, so I didn't do that. And as my kids have reminded me, thankfully, I somehow wind up on the right side of the being a nerd and dorky. So once I figured out, got a beat on some of this culture stuff, my career shifted into leading organizational transformations. Over the course of my career, I've started 9 new ones at different levels. I've renovated 4 that were underperforming, and I redesigned 2 that they were doing fine. They were just tooled for yesterday, not for tomorrow. So we had to redo those. I earned a couple of awards in the process. In the late 90s, I got involved in this movement that would eventually earn the name Agile. At that time, it was just this milieu of random stuff going on, and this was largely through a group called the Cutter Consortium. There you can find some articles that were published, and I authored a book. So all of that experience now occurred over a pretty broad base. I'm pretty proud of having had an eclectic career. So positions, I've been a CIO, I've been a COO, I've been a VP, and these has been in organizations that have ranged from Fortune 250s down to small startups, second stage companies. And I've done that in a variety of functions. It's been in IT, engineering, product development, operations, in a variety of industries. So the lessons I'm going to share with you, all that organizational change stuff on the previous slide occurred over this swath of companies. So it's got a pretty broad base. You can see some of the companies there. So what you should expect, first off, you should not expect, there's no bold new theory here. If you're looking for it, don't bother, it's not there. The material I'll be presenting has been said before and by others with stronger pedigrees in mind. What I do have is that leadership scar tissue. The way I learned about this stuff is I would go out and find who's the industry leader on this, who are the thought leaders on this stuff. I would go read their book. I would find out a class they're teaching or a conference they were holding, something like that, and I'd go attend that. And then I'd bring that back to my organization, whatever one I was leading at the time, which I treated like a giant laboratory, and I'd try it out. We'd conduct some experiments. And if it worked, I kept it and I built on it, and if it didn't work, we'd throw it out. So this is the stuff I found that worked. What I'm going to try to be doing is helping you come out of your Chinese village. How many people have heard that metaphor before? Okay, here's what I mean. Say we go to some remote region in China, and we go up to the village elders and we say, I want you to pull together the 10 smartest people in your village. The 10 people that not only the smartest, but the ones that the village respects the most. Bring them together. We meet they get the 10 people, they bring them together. I say, okay, I want you folks to design the world's greatest home. Money is no object, materials is no object, right? If you can think it, and if physics permit it, we can build it. Right? What are the odds they come up with a Williamsburg Colonial? 0, right? They're not going to do it. Same thing, by the way, if I go to a village in Virginia and I ask them to bring me the 10 smartest people in your village, and I give them the same problem. What are the odds they're going to come up with a Chinese-looking home? None. It just doesn't happen. We all live in our own Chinese village. And what I'm going to try and do now is draw you out of yours. All right? Okay, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to first go over the why, the what, and the how of Agile. And then I'm going to dive in. We'll do a recap and a couple closing remarks about that. Under the why, there's some lame reasons and there's some legitimate reasons. And we'll go to that. And then to give you context, I'm going to help you understand how did we even get to this point? How did we get to now? So what are some lame reasons? They're the obvious ones. Somebody's got an MBO, says your organization needs to become agile. They got a box to check. Okay, that doesn't work. If Mike and I, when we're talking with a client, if we get that there's even a whiff of that, we politely decline the work. Some other ones is, well, it's all the rage. I want to do this, right? They read a book, they saw an article in an airline magazine, right? Or they see all the social media chatter, it's a fad. Those are both really lousy reasons. A good reason is that I need to speed up, improve product development, their speed of delivery, their adaptiveness to change. Okay, that we can work with. That's a good one. My organization suffers from local optimization. We need to optimize around a whole system. We're divided up into parts, so the parts optimizes to themselves and it sub-optimizes the whole. That's a problem. Okay, we can talk about that. The one that is most often the case, but is least said, is we're really tired of being on the hamster wheel. The work is coming at us faster. We're getting less time to respond. It's becoming less predictable. And the only solution we've had so far is to turn up the speed of the organizational treadmill. And we got it on high. We're getting tired. We can't keep it up. And the next person who tells me, well, you just got to work smarter, not harder, does so at their peril. Right? Those are some good reasons. And the fact is, how many people have heard the word VUCA? Nobody? Okay, let me introduce it. This was, it arose out of the U.S. Army under Stanley McChrystal's command, and it is the way that they came to describe battlefield conditions in fighting terror in Iran and Afghanistan. They said those conditions were characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and they coined the term VUCA. And it applies really well to current market conditions, economic conditions. In fact, the world is becoming more VUCA. It is the new norm. And it's affecting how people, the efficiency and effectiveness with which people can do their work. Prospering in a VUCA world requires a very different skill set, a very different mindset. Okay. Meanwhile, there's some things that don't change. I don't care how much VUCA is going on. Right? There's some things that are always constant. Among them are two that are for sure. And these are the source of every organization's political power, their influence with others, their relevance, right? The first one is their ability to tune to their customers. Now, some companies align with their customers. That means that they are aligned with their customers' requirements. Somebody who's tuned is aligned with their customers' customers, so they can be out there thinking with them. That's the difference between being in tune and being aligned. The other thing is they have to honor their commitments. Those things are non-negotiable. Tim.
So VUCA, the definition within each of the letters there, that's something that's been around for a while, I'm assuming, but now we're just identifying it as these are the four kind of critical areas of a business that are critical areas that impact a business potential growth.
Right. So they're more a descriptor of the things that are going on outside in the world. Market conditions, economic conditions, military conditions, if that's the business. It arose out of the fight against terrorism. How do you have the largest, most powerful army in the world be completely baffled by guys who are dressed in rags, and make their weapons out of parts from Axeman, The advantage they have is they knew how to operate and create an environment that is characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And the argument is that just regular business in life is getting more like that, not less like that. All right, so we've got the irresistible force of unrelenting, unyielding, unpredictable change, meaning the immovable objects of tuning to your customer and honoring your commitment. That's the dilemma. In fact, it's one of the changes that drove. I took strategic planning from Harvard in 1981, and everything they taught me is now wrong. The way they taught strategic planning, in a nutshell, this is the key point from a week's worth of conference, is you start with ends, and then you figure out ways, then you figure out means. So what is it you want to accomplish? What's the end? Well, I want to go to the North Pole. Okay, what are the ways you're going to get there? Well, I could walk. I could go by dog sled. I could go by snowmobile. I could fly. Right? Okay, well, I'm going to go by snowmobile. Well, what are the different means that you need? Well, I'm going to need snowmobiles. So I'm going to need gas, probably fueling depots. I'm going to need a crew. I'm going to need clothing. I'm going to need spare parts. You figure all that out, and you make a plan, and you go. In today's world, it works more like this. You still have to have an end in mind, right? Start with the end in mind. But now what you do is you gather as many resources as you can afford to carry. And every time you get a chance to move north, you move north. Let me give you another way to think about this. How many people hate sports analogies? Anybody really hate? Okay, well then you can doze off for a minute because I'm going to go into one. So one way to think of it is that the old-fashioned way of doing strategic planning is like an American football game plan. So you got two teams on the field, play is stopped. One guy calls a play. In fact, in today's world, it's not even a guy on the field. It's sent in from the sideline. We're all gathered in a circle. One guy calls the play. Everybody with that play, everybody knows their passing route, their blocking assignment, their rushing route, things like that. They line up, and on one guy's count, the ball is snapped, action occurs until an independent third party blows a whistle, and then they stop. And then you know what they do? They get back in a circle again. That guy off field, he sends in another play. That's how business used to be conducted in a static world. Today's world is more like a world football, hockey, basketball game plan. There are still plays. There are still ways in which you get from A to B. But how you do that is dependent on your speed, your strength, your skill, and your attuneness to what the hell's going on around you. That's today's world. Today's world is more like hockey, world football, and basketball, and not at all like American football. The fact is that today's, yeah, Mike.
So Jim, is that another way to show how we are reacting to change? Exactly. More than being, strictly one vector in?
Right. So in a basketball or hockey or world football kind of league, you can't predict what the other team is going to do necessarily. So you have to be better at reacting to change than you are at predicting. In fact, you cannot rely on your powers to predict change, because a player with any skill, strength, or speed is going to beat you.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right. The fact is that today's world is stretching our traditional organizational solutions beyond the limits of their original design. So what we're going to do now is going to move into how did we get here? All right? Because I hope you will find that enlightening. I think you'll recognize a lot of this stuff. How did we get to now? Agile is an organizational solution. We know from history that the need for new organizational solutions is driven by two things, one or both of two things: advancements in technology and or expansions in organizational scope or span. All right, so let's go back. The history of trying to create effective organizations out of fallible individuals is as old as the Stone Age. First signs of trying to do that go back to the Upper Paleolithic period, 40,000, depending on how you count, 35,000, 40,000 years ago. That organization was pretty primitive, as you would expect. It was hierarchical, command and control. But that's okay because those styles are not bad. They produce conformity. And conformity is what you want if you're leading a kingdom, if you're leading an army, or if you're leading a church, right? Fast forward 40,000 years, and we're now in the middle of the 19th century. We have this new land technology called railroads. And it's appeared on the scene. People can now travel comfortably from coast to coast in a matter of days and weeks rather than months, right? These vast networks are built, and we have to adopt a new global timekeeping convention called Universal Coordinated Time, because everybody kept time different. You can't run a railroad that way, all right? Plus, just the logistics of keeping trains fueled, keeping trains provisioned across this network means that whole new disciplines in logistics have to develop. And the railroads realized that they needed professional managers and management systems. This is the rise of indirect labor, all right? And it was given the name systematic management. Now we're going to skip ahead another 60 years. 1900 Paris Exposition. Frederick Taylor, 44 years old. He had been working at Bethlehem Steel. He recreated a subset of what he created at Bethlehem Steel in Pennsylvania at this exposition, just a small thing in Paris. It was amazing. People traveled hundreds of thousands of miles. They would wait in line for hours just to get a few minutes inside this thing to see what Frederick Taylor's model had looked like. It was it's the equivalent today of Steve Jobs introducing the iPhone. That's how big a deal it was in the early 1900s. This guy, that's Frederick Taylor. The genius of his process was not technological. He worked with the same equipment, same technology as everybody else. But what he had done is through a series of experiments, he determined the optimal temperature for cutting steel. He determined the optimal distance between machinists and tools, the optimal way for water to cool the lathes, optimal speed of internal conveyors. I think the conventional rate for cutting steel was like 9 feet a minute. He could do 50. All right? There was not a second of lost time, not an ounce of wasted material, wasted movement, nothing like that. He produced the best way for doing this. And this created a mindset, the one best way mindset. And we took it everywhere. We took it not just in mechanical things. We put it in this is how we built schools. This is how we conducted classrooms. Everything. This is how we did human resources. There was one best way, right? And you two workers down there, if you've got a question or a problem, you don't see her, you come see me, because I designed the one best way. And that's how it worked. And it was adopted, like I said, everywhere. And there's people who devoted their careers just to advancing this vision. Right? It's probably one of the biggest movements in management science that there's ever been. And it was called scientific management. Skip ahead another 60 years. So this is kind of fortuitous here because it just we had our 50th anniversary last week. Today is the 50th anniversary of their return to Earth. So how many people can tell me how many humans have been on the moon? Nobody. It's the schools. 12. It was an amazing in my mind, it's the greatest feat ever accomplished by man ever. It was a tremendous technological achievement, engineering achievement. The Saturn V is still the most powerful engine ever built, all right? But what most people don't know is also an organizational tour de force, because they did this with 300,000 employees, 20,000 contractors, 200 universities all scattered around 80 countries. An organizational tour de force. And they gave us what's called systems management. Now I'm going to dive into this just a little bit because you're going to recognize some things, and I want you to know where they came from. Initial problem they had in rocketry was, so you get these things cost a lot of money, and the only way you get data on it is to transmit it back after you fire it. By the way, it's a destructive test. You fire the rocket, it's done, you have to go build another one. Well, they were having trouble because the rocket vibrations were causing all the connections to break. So there was you'd lose communications, you lost telemetry, you lost all that stuff, right? And now you got a destroyed rocket. And the thing they found is that the rocket vibrations were nothing like vibrations caused by propeller engines or jet engines. Those they were fairly predictable, happened at regular frequencies. Rocket vibrations, however, happened at different frequencies, seemingly random. They would change, and as the rocket would consume fuel, and the remaining fuel slosh around in the tanks and the lines, the frequencies would change some more. Right? So that's the problem. The next thing they discovered is that, just like universities at the time and every other company at the time, they were organized by discipline. The trouble was this problem couldn't be solved by one discipline. This problem spanned between propulsion experts, electrical engineers, and things like this problem was the first one to earn the newly minted term systems issue. That's where that started. So they took a systems approach to it. And their solution was a mix of both how they technically did their work and how they socially governed the conduct of that work. They made some changes in their processes, and they made some changes in their culture. Here's some of them. The role of systems engineer was invented. Somebody who could work across all those disciplines. Components and subassemblies were designed to be more rugged, which is something you'd expect. A new discipline called reliability was created, and reliability in the existing quality organization were now given free range. They didn't report to individuals who could kind of put their thumbs on the scale, right, and influence their work. Stronger emphasis was placed on testing components not only from the vendors as they arrived, but they went into the component manufacturers' factories. And they want to know more about the component manufacturer themselves, right? So they went deeper into that whole thing. They came up with new and more rigorous methods for things as simple as how do you solder a connection. So they took the old standard for telegraph linemen, soldering standard, and they put it on steroids, that sort of thing. New traceability, they invented traceability. Now we trace everything from the component manufacturer, not just from when it hit our doors, but from inside the component manufacturer. We want to know where it began life through to consumption. They created, how many people are familiar with CAPA? Corrective action, preventative action. This started with these guys, so they could track problems from their creation through their resolution. They also came up with highly structured approaches for systems development and project management. A lot of the approaches you use today, we use today. So the world marveled at NASA's ability to organize and direct hundreds of thousands of people towards a single common goal. In fact, Congress even convened meetings to uncover the secrets to NASA's success. When's the last time you heard of a congressional hearing to uncover the secrets of somebody's success? You don't, right? Well, they learned that there's things, this structured linear systems development process, this intricate system of project management controls. They said that was it.